a new place to call home. This warehouse is a COVID-safe space for more than 40 homeless people.
Somewhere in Stoke-on-Trent, England, there's an abandoned factory the size of a football pitch. For years, it sat empty. Broken windows, cold concrete, the kind of building people walk past every single day without a second glance. Today, inside that warehouse, there are rows of cozy wooden glamping pods. The same pods families pay £60 a night to sleep in at holiday parks. Except nobody here is on holiday. Every single pod is home to someone who, not long ago, was sleeping in a doorway. And the man who built it isn't a politician, a developer, or a housing expert. He's a 70-something retired footballer who saw something on the news one night and couldn't look away. This is the story of how one city turned an abandoned warehouse into a village of glamping pods for homeless people. And by the end of it, you might wonder why every city isn't doing the same thing. It starts in 2016. A 71-year-old man is sitting at home watching television when a news segment about homelessness in Britain comes on. The camera pans across a street he recognizes instantly. It's his city, Stoke-on-Trent, the place where he raised his family and built his life after decades in professional football. Most people would shake their heads, mutter something about how terrible it is, and change the channel. He didn't. He turned off the television, got in his car, and drove into the city center after dark to see it for himself. What he found on those streets changed everything. His name is Macari. If you follow British football, you already know it. He came up through Celtic in Scotland, winning trophies as a young man in one of the most storied clubs in the world. Then came the move that made him a household name, Manchester United. He made over 400 appearances for United across nearly a decade, playing in front of crowds of 60,000 at Old Trafford, scoring in an FA Cup final, living the kind of life most kids kicking a ball in the street can only dream about. After his playing days ended, he moved into management, taking charge of clubs across England and Scotland, including 2 separate stints managing Stoke City itself. Stoke wasn't just a job for Macari. It became his home. He stayed long after the football ended. But this story is not about football. It's about what Macari found that night when he drove into the center of his own city. Men and women curled up in shop doorways, wrapped in sleeping bags against the cold. Young people huddled under bridges, faces he recognized from around town. People who had simply fallen through every crack in the system until there was nowhere left to fall. And it kept hitting him, street after street. This wasn't 1 or 2 people down on their luck. This was dozens. In his city, Stoke-on-Trent is not a wealthy place. It was built on pottery and manufacturing, 6 towns stitched together by industry, and when those industries declined, a lot of people went down with them. Factories closed, jobs disappeared, wages stagnated. By the mid-2010s, homelessness in Stoke had become impossible to ignore, and yet somehow, most people managed to ignore it anyway. And this is where Macari did something that separates him from almost everyone else who watches the news and feels bad about it for 10 minutes. He went to the Stoke-on-Trent City Council the next morning and asked for a single thing: not funding, not a committee, not a feasibility study, a key to any empty building they had. Think about how unusual that is. Most people who want to help homelessness start by asking for money. Macari started by asking for a door he could open. They gave him one. The building was on Regent Road in Hanley, right next to the local mosque. It was basic, cold, and needed serious work. The heating barely functioned. The walls needed repairs. But it was a roof. And for the people sleeping on the streets of Stoke that winter, a roof was everything. Within weeks, Macari had transformed that space into a dormitory-style emergency shelter. Camp beds lined up in rows, washing machines donated by local businesses, showers installed in the back. a small kitchen where volunteers could serve hot meals every evening. He called it the Macari Center, and around 40 people were using it every single night. And it wasn't just a bed. That's the part people miss about good shelters. The center offered access to laptops so residents could search for jobs and fill out applications. Lockers, where they could store personal belongings safely, sometimes the first secure storage they'd had in years. Advice workers who could help them navigate the benefit system, deal with addiction, or reconnect with family members they had lost touch with somewhere along the way. Local restaurants donated food, volunteers gave up their evenings. An entire quiet network of ordinary people in Stoke kept the place running. For 4 years, the center operated as a lifeline, not a solution to homelessness. Macari would be the first to tell you that. A camp bed in a dormitory is not a home, but it was a place where people could stop free-falling, where they could sleep, eat, wash their clothes, and start to rebuild some sense of stability, some sense of being human again. And then the government shut it down. In May of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the UK government declared that all dormitory-style accommodation for homeless people had to close immediately. The logic was sound. Open dormitories were breeding grounds for COVID. People sleeping side by side, sharing bathrooms, sharing air. One infected person walks in, and within a week, the virus tears through a shelter full of some of the most medically vulnerable people in the country. The risk was too high to accept, but understanding the logic didn't make the consequences any easier. 40 residents had to be moved out overnight. Some were relocated to the Holiday Inn Express in Trentham Lakes, temporarily housed in hotel rooms paid for by the council as part of the national emergency response. Others scattered. Back to doorways, back to park benches, back to the kind of cold uncertainty that is very hard to understand unless you have lived it. For any other shelter operator, this would have been the end of the chapter. Wait for guidance, fill out forms, apply for funding, hope the government eventually comes up with a plan while your former residents sleep outside. But Lou Macari is not a man who fills out forms and waits. He spent his career making split-second decisions on the pitch at Old Trafford, reading the game 2 moves ahead, and that instinct never left him. So he started driving, looking for a new space, something big enough to house all 40 residents while keeping them safely distanced from one another. And he found it just 300 yards from the original center on Regent Road, a disused factory, empty, cavernous, roughly the size of a football pitch. 22,500 square feet of cold industrial nothing. The kind of building that had been sitting there for years while people slept on pavement a few streets away. Most people looked at that building and saw a relic, a leftover from an economy that didn't exist anymore. Macari saw something else entirely. He saw square footage, he saw shelter from the rain, he saw potential. But a giant empty warehouse doesn't solve the distancing problem on its own. Put 40 camp beds in a big room and you've just built a bigger dormitory. He needed a way to give every single person their own separate, enclosed space, and he had no idea what that looked like. Until a few days later, when the answer appeared on the side of a road. Macari was driving through the English countryside when he spotted a row of small wooden structures lined up in a field. Camping pods, the kind you see at holiday parks and music festivals, self-contained wooden cabins where families pay 50 or 60 pounds a night to sleep in nature while still having electricity, insulation, and a proper mattress. Glamping, glamorous camping, a luxury product invented for people with disposable income who want the outdoors without the discomfort. And right there, passing that field at probably 40 miles an hour, Lou Macari had the idea that would change everything. What if you took those pods, the same cozy wooden pods tourists pay to sleep in, and put them inside the warehouse? Each person gets their own private space, their own 4 walls, their own door. You solve the COVID distancing problem instantly because nobody is sleeping shoulder to shoulder anymore. Every resident is separated by solid wood, but you also solve something deeper, something that dormitory shelters had never been able to fix, no matter how clean or well-run they were. You give people dignity. He called a company named Arch Leisure, who manufactured the pods. He called the council. He called Unitas, the council's housing repairs division. And within weeks, the transformation of that empty factory began. Unitas gutted the interior and built out the infrastructure a small indoor village would need. Toilet and shower blocks, a fully equipped kitchen, laundry facilities, staff offices, upgraded electrical systems running throughout the building. And then the pods went in, lowered into place in neat rows across the factory floor. Fire-resistant wooden structures, each one providing 8 square meters of personal floor space, roughly the size of a small bedroom. Every pod came with an individual bed, a heater, and a front door that closed. Picture it for a second. You walk through the doors of a grim old factory in Stoke-on-Trent, expecting concrete and echoes, and instead you find what looks like a tiny indoor holiday village. Rows of warm wooden cabins under an industrial roof. It shouldn't work. On paper, it sounds absurd. In reality, it was one of the most quietly brilliant housing ideas Britain had seen in years. But the detail that mattered more than the beds, more than the heaters, more than the walls, was the number on each door. Each pod was given an address number. Pod 1, Pod 2, Pod 3, all the way down the rows. And that seemingly small detail solved one of the biggest invisible barriers that homeless people face every single day. When you do not have an address, you cannot apply for a job. You cannot open a bank account. You cannot register with a doctor. You cannot receive mail. You cannot sign up for most benefits without a fight. You exist, but on paper, you do not. The modern system requires an address to acknowledge that you are a real person, and without one, you are functionally invisible. It's a trap, too. You need a job to get a home, but you need an address to get a job, round and round with no way in. Now, a resident at the Macari Center could walk into a job center, fill out a form, and write down a real address. Just like anyone else. Macari described the change as incredible. And honestly, it is one of those details that sounds small until you sit with it for a moment and realize just how much of modern life depends on a few numbers and a street name. Then came a touch nobody expected. The League Managers Association, the organization that represents football managers across England, donated a television for every single pod. LG, the electronics company that sponsors the association, provided the sets. And Macari made a point about it that stuck with everyone who heard it. Homeless people do not have televisions. They are not out on the street carrying them around. It sounds obvious, but nobody thinks about it. For years, these residents had been cut off from the most ordinary shared experience in the country. Suddenly, they could watch the news. They could watch a football match on a Saturday. They could feel connected to the world again instead of locked outside of it, pressed against the glass. And the shift in behavior was almost immediate. Macari told the BBC that residents went from being disorganized to showing genuine pride in their pods. They kept their spaces clean. They decorated them. They put photos up on the walls. They made their beds in the morning, not because anyone told them to, but because it was their bed, in their room, behind their door. They started treating those 8 square meters like a home. Because for the first time in months, or in some cases years, that is exactly what it was. One resident named Lee Dowling had been at the center on and off for 2 years, battling a drug addiction that had cost him his relationship with his family. In the dormitory days, he was surviving. In the pod, something changed. He said it was a massive improvement because for the first time, he had his own space to think, to breathe, to sit alone with the door closed and start making actual plans for what came next. Recovery is hard enough with privacy. It is nearly impossible without it. And then there was Chloe. She was 19 years old when she arrived at the center. She had been on the streets, she was terrified, and she had a young son. She had been told that if she did not find stable accommodation, her child would be taken away and put up for adoption. Read that again. A teenager, sleeping rough, told she was about to lose her baby because she didn't have an address. The Macari Center was, in her own words, her last hope. She and her partner moved into one of the pods, and when she spoke to the BBC about it, her voice cracked. She said it was amazing. She said it was lovely and warm. 2 words, lovely and warm. For most of us, that's how you'd describe a cafe or someone's living room. For a 19-year-old mother who had been sleeping rough and facing the possibility of losing her child, those 2 words meant safety. They meant a future. They meant her son would stay with her. Chloe was not alone. The Macari Center was helping roughly 50 people at any given time, and each one of them carried a story just as heavy. Veterans who came home and could not readjust to civilian life. People who lost a job, then missed rent, then lost everything in a matter of months. People fleeing abusive relationships with nothing but the clothes they were wearing. The stereotype says, homelessness happens to a certain kind of person. The pod village said otherwise. It happens to teenagers with babies. It happens to men in their 50s who worked their whole lives. It happens fast, and it can happen to almost anyone. If this story resonates with you, and you want to go deeper into the kind of practical resources and strategies that actually help people in crisis, whether they are veterans, families, or anyone who has fallen through the cracks, I put together something called the Veterans Blueprint. It goes further than I can in a video like this, with the specific steps, programs, and resources that actually move the needle. You can find it through the link in the description below. Now, the story of what happened in Stoke-on-Trent is remarkable on its own, but what makes it truly significant is that the idea did not stay in one English city. It is spreading. In the United States, a company called Pallet has been building rapid response shelter pods on the same core principle. As of recent reports, Pallet has deployed shelters in over 100 communities across 16 states. Each unit costs around $6,000 and comes equipped with heat, electricity, a locked door, and beds. A crew can assemble one in under an hour. When a city has hundreds of people sleeping outside and permanent housing is years away from being built, that speed is not a luxury. It is the entire point. The founder, Amy King, came to the idea from an unusual direction. She ran a construction business that deliberately employed people who had been through the justice system and addiction recovery, and her workers kept telling her the same thing about the traditional shelters they had stayed in. There was no privacy, no security, no way to keep your belongings, your documents, or your pets safe. Some of them chose a tent over a shelter bed for exactly those reasons, which sounds irrational until you understand what they were protecting. So she designed something different, something small, fast to build, and above all, something with a door that locks. That locked door keeps coming up. In Stoke, in Seattle, in Portland, in every pod program, in every city, on both sides of the Atlantic, the residents say the same thing. The door is what matters. After months or years of sleeping with one eye open, wondering who might take your shoes or your bag, or worse, a door that locks is not a luxury. It is the foundation of everything else. You cannot meaningfully address someone's mental health, their addiction, or their employment while they are still worried about where they are going to sleep tonight and whether their belongings will still exist in the morning. A locked door is the first step toward every other step. The idea keeps evolving too. In Bolton, England, the council installed 9 self-contained sleeper pods in a former car park in late 2025, designed specifically as a stepping stone rather than a destination. Residents receive intensive support over a 6 to 10 week period before transitioning into permanent housing with 24-hour security and CCTV on site. Not a place to stay forever. A bridge, a launch pad. And the numbers behind all of this demand attention because they explain why these improvised solutions keep appearing. In England alone, nearly 300,000 households experienced acute homelessness in 2024. That is a 45% increase since 2012. Over 4,600 people were estimated to be sleeping rough on a single night in autumn of that year on the streets of one of the wealthiest countries on earth. And in the United States, over 745,000 people were homeless on a single night, according to the most recent national count, the highest figure ever recorded. Among them, roughly 32,500 were military veterans, people who served their country and are now sleeping in cars and under bridges. Those are not just statistics. That is what it looks like when a system decides, through 1,000 small failures, that some people are not worth catching. Back in Stoke-on-Trent, the pod warehouse became something of a landmark. The Prime Minister at the time wrote Macari a personal letter, calling him a true point of light. The Big Issue, Britain's well-known street newspaper, named him a changemaker in 2022. And every year, hundreds of ordinary people brought sleeping bags and duvets to the Bet365 Stadium, the home ground of Stoke City, for the Big Sleep Out, a fundraising event where locals spent one night sleeping on the cold stadium concourse to raise money for the center's work. One night outside, by choice, to fund warm nights inside for people who never had the choice. The Macari Foundation eventually opened a new facility called the Victoria on Fletcher Road, offering fully self-contained accommodation where residents could take the next step toward genuinely independent living. Real flats, real kitchens, real front doors onto a real street. And with that, the original pod warehouse was closed as the foundation shifted its focus forward. Macari said it was a difficult decision, but the goal had never been to keep people in pods forever. The goal was always to help them move on. The warehouse was a bridge, and bridges are meant to be crossed. And maybe that is the most important part of this entire story. The pods were never the answer to homelessness. Nobody, least of all Macari, ever pretended that an 8-square-meter wooden box inside an old factory is the same as a real home. What the pods proved is something bigger. You do not need a billion-dollar government program, a 10-year strategy document, or a new department to start making a difference right now, tonight. You need an empty building, some wooden structures, and one person who refuses to look away. Lou Macari was not a housing expert. He was not a social worker. He was not a politician. He was a retired footballer who saw a problem in his own city and decided that the gap between seeing it and doing something about it was too wide to live with. So he closed it, with a borrowed key, an abandoned warehouse, and an idea he got driving past a field at 40 miles an hour. Sometimes the biggest ideas start exactly like that. A man glancing out a car window at a row of glamping pods and thinking, those could work. If you found value in this story, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this one every week.